Hamas publicly announced its willingness to enter into immediate negotiations for a hostage release based on the proposal that was put forth by US President Trump. Trump responded by saying that he believes that Hamas is now ready for peace and ordered Israel to stop all bombing operations in the Gaza Strip. What does Trump's proposal actually include? What is Israel's position in all this? And is the war in fact coming to an end? You're watching the Israel-Palestine Report with Professor Alon Burstein. Hit that subscribe button. Let's dive in. On Friday, October 3rd, Hamas gave its response to the proposal that was put forth by US President Trump to end the war in Gaza. Now, there's been a lot of confusion and contradictory information with regards to what was actually said in Hamas's response and the extent to which it corresponds with the proposal that was put forth by US President Trump. So, what I'm going to do in this report is take a step back. I'm going to review the main facets of Trump's peace plan, and I'm going to say that he is framing this plan not as just a ceasefire, but as peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Then I'm going to discuss what is Israel's position with regards to Trump's plan, what is Hamas's position, where do things stand, where do things go from here. The plan that was put forward by Trump was reportedly developed over the last several weeks. According to some reports, the White House started to develop this plan following Israel's failed assassination attempt of the Hamas leadership in Qatar. After that, Trump realized that he needs to, quote-unquote, step in even more and try to bring an end to the war personally. The plan was first presented by Trump to a group of Arab and Muslim leaders during a meeting in New York on September 23rd, and then it was presented to Israel during a meeting between Trump and Netanyahu in the White House on Monday of this past week. Now, I will say that during this past week, I uploaded the video in which I read through the entire plan and discussed each of its components. So, if you want a detailed breakdown as to what each of those 20 points say and how feasible are they, I'll put a link to that video in the first comment below. Instead of that, what I'm going to do here is broadly summarize how the plan relates to the major facets of the negotiations, how the plan relates to what will happen in order to end the war, and after the war is officially over, and where do things go, again, before I relate to what is Hamas's position and what is Israel's position. We're looking into the plan that was put forth by US President Trump on the issue of hostages. The plan states that, quote, within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned, end quote. In other words, Trump is saying we're no longer going to do a phased release of hostages. All the hostages, the living hostages and the bodies of hostages, will be returned within 72 hours. In exchange for this, Israel is supposed to release 250 Palestinians that are serving life sentences in Israeli jails, as well as 1,700 Palestinians that were arrested in Gaza since October 7th, and the plan says, including all women and children in Israeli jails. In addition to this, in exchange for each body of a hostage that is returned, Israel will return the bodies of 15 Palestinians from Gaza who are held by Israel. Briefly analyzing this aspect of hostages versus Palestinian prisoners, this is one of the examples where the plan on the one hand tries to be very straightforward. On the other hand, it still leaves a lot of things open for negotiations. This is just an example. It says that 250 Palestinian prisoners that are serving life sentences in Israeli jails are going to be released. There are a total of 290 Palestinian prisoners that are serving life sentences in Israeli jails. The plan does not say who decides which ones are released. In the past, Hamas has demanded that Marwan Barghouti, Ahmad Sadat, and other Palestinian leaders be released from jails. Israel said that's never going to happen. Who decides that? That still remains to be negotiated. It also says that all women and children will be released. It doesn't make clear. Does that mean all women and children leading up to 1,700 people who have been arrested in Gaza? Is this only from Gaza or the West Bank? All I'm illustrating here is that the plan tries to actually put forth what is the framework, but this still needs to be negotiated with regards to hostages and Palestinian prisoners. On the issue of a ceasefire / an end to the war and the Israeli military withdrawing from the Gaza Strip, Article 3 of the plan states, and I quote, "If both sides agree to this proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed-upon line to prepare for a hostage release. During this time, all military operations, including aerial and artillery bombardments, will be suspended. Battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete stage withdrawal. So, looking at this theoretically, what does this mean? First of all, again, the plan is trying to say, once the sides agree to this framework, the war is already theoretically over. That is also different than the previous proposals and the previous hostage agreements. Then each time it said there will be a phased release of hostages, and then there will be negotiations over an end to the war. What this plan says is, from the moment both sides agree, now the war is over. Second, with regards to the Israeli military stage withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, the White House published a map that shows the current positions held by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, with 3 different redeployment lines saying each one of these represent where the Israeli military will withdraw to as the plan progresses. I'll also say that this is very likely subject to negotiations, since this map that I'm showing here is far from an accurate depiction of the exact positions that the Israeli military is holding, and is far from accurate enough to say what positions will be taken up exactly. Will this be within Palestinian cities, outside of Palestinian cities? What is exactly going to happen? I'll return to this a little bit later when we talk about the Israeli military withdrawal and what Trump has said since, but again, I'm saying with regards to the facet of the war ending and a possible ceasefire and a military withdrawal, the plan does say that the war will end immediately and that the Israeli military will withdraw in stages. What those stages are exactly is something that likely still needs to be negotiated. Relating to the issue of humanitarian aid, the plan states that the amount of aid coming into Gaza will increase exponentially, mentioning the quantities of the deal of January 2025 ceasefire agreement as a minimum of how much aid is going to enter. That agreement said that 600 aid trucks would come into Gaza each day, and also says that more industrial equipment and equipment for clearing rubble and fixing infrastructure in Gaza is going to come in, so that this plan says that the amount of aid coming in is going to be at a minimum what was agreed upon in January of 2025. Importantly, the plan says that all aid distribution will be run solely through the United Nations and its different agencies and through the Palestinian Red Crescent. It explicitly does not mention the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, that new operation that was established in the last several months by reportedly the United States and Israel. And the fact that this is all geared towards the United Nations is one of the things that in the past has caused negotiations to break down. Israel has said that it will not work with UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency. This plan says that all aid will be distributed solely by the United Nations. The plan also says that the Rafah crossing, that border over here that goes between Gaza and Egypt, will be opened in the Gaza Strip based on the January 2025 agreement. Again, that ceasefire agreement. I will say likely that is another thing that still needs to be negotiated. Relating to Hamas disarming and the demilitarization of Gaza, something that Israel has insisted on time and again. Article 13 of Trump's proposal states that, I quote, all military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnel and weapons production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt, end quote. The plan goes on to discuss demilitarization and under international supervision, a process of decommissioning of the different fighters in Gaza. It also states that Hamas members will be given amnesty if they, again quote, commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission of their weapons, end quote. Alternatively, the plan says if the Hamas members are not willing to do that, they can also choose to leave Gaza and will be given safe passage. Again, one of the different things that need to be negotiated here is that it says all military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapons production facilities. Unclear what exactly is an offensive weapon versus a defensive weapon when it comes to what is happening in the Gaza Strip. Does this plan require Hamas to give up every single gun that it ever had? Or does it require to only give up offensive weapons that are explicitly offensive, like rockets and missiles? Unclear. Likely that still needs to be negotiated. In terms of providing security in the Gaza Strip, and this is also, I'll say, associated with the IDF withdrawal from Gaza, the plan envisions a temporary international stabilization force, or as the plan calls it, the ISF, which will be led by the United States and Arab international actors. The role of this force in the plan is not fully fleshed out. Article 15 says that the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, will train and provide support to vetted Palestinian police force in the Gaza Strip, and will also work with Israel and Egypt to secure the border areas. So this appears that the ISF primarily is going to be training and supervising Palestinians as they take up the role of security in Gaza. Article 16, however, goes on to say that the ISF will take control over all territory that the Israeli military withdraws from, saying that this withdrawal will happen, quote, based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization that will be agreed upon between the IDF, the Israeli military, the ISF, International Stabilization Force, the guarantors, and the United States, with the objectives of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to Israel, Egypt, or its citizens, end quote. Looking at this, like the redeployment lines that the White House put out, this also clearly is going to require negotiations and much more fleshing out of what this actually means. Among others, it's very important, some of the things that are going to be debated is who decides when an area is quote-unquote terror-free, when an area is no longer a threat and the Israeli military should withdraw from it. Does Israel decide that? Or do international actors decide that? What are the standards, among others? Does Israel have a veto over who sends soldiers to the International Stabilization Force? Can any country send soldiers to this, or does Israel have to approve? All this is likely going to come up in the upcoming negotiations. Finally, when it comes to the governance and future of the Gaza Strip, the plan states that there will be no forced displacement from Gaza, i.e., departing from Trump's initial plan that was presented in February, that all Palestinians are going to be evacuated willfully or not willfully from Gaza. This plan says that no one will be forcibly evacuated from Gaza. It also says that Hamas and other factions will agree to have no direct or indirect role in the future governance of the Gaza Strip. The plan lays out two bodies that will be in charge of the governments in Gaza. One is an apolitical Palestinian committee that will be responsible for the day-to-day life and public services in the Gaza Strip. And above that will be a supervising international transitional body. According to the plan, this international transitional body will be called the Board of Peace and will be chaired by U.S. President Trump himself, alongside the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Tony Blair, and other heads of state. And the plan says that the international transitional body, the Board of Peace, will be in charge of funding for the rebuilding and redevelopment of Gaza, and will serve in this role until the Palestinian Authority undergoes deep reforms based on a different plan from the year 2020, and then is able to take control of the Gaza Strip. In other words, the international transitory body is supposed to be in charge until the Palestinian Authority takes control of Gaza. Looking further into the future, Article 19 of Trump's plan says that once the Palestinian Authority takes control of the Gaza Strip following those reforms, quote, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspirations of the Palestinian people, end quote. The plan also then discusses interfaith dialogue and plans for promoting coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians in the future. So the plan gives, quote-unquote, a nod towards the fact that Palestinians aspire towards a state. The plan does not say that a state will be established, but that a roadmap may be developed within this proposal in order to allow the Palestinians to have a state. So, taking a step back and looking at this plan sort of as a macro, the 20-point plan that was put forth by U.S. President Trump, I'll say two things. On the one hand, it is clear that this plan is taking a much broader approach than the previous hostage negotiations plans. They all talked about a phased hostage release and then possibly negotiations over an end to the war and Then looking forward in Gaza, this plan in turn looks immediately at the end of the war, the release of all hostages, and also mechanisms for the governance and the future of the Gaza Strip, and the plan even goes further, looking at the entire Israeli-Palestinian conflict. On the other hand, I'll also say that it's important to note that this plan should possibly be understood more as a framework for the sides to work together, rather than an actual plan to move forward, since I'll say even if both sides fully accepted this and said, great, we sign on the dotted line, we'll do this now, there are still a lot of things that need to be negotiated between the sides. Each one of them is going to say, yes, I agree, but of course, I get to be the one who determines which Palestinian prisoners will be released. Yes, I agree, but of course, I get to be the one who determines who will participate in that international force. Yes, I agree, but of course I get to be the one who determines at what point the IDF needs to withdraw. All these things still need to be negotiated. Another thing is the entrance of humanitarian aid. When does that start? Does that start after hostages are released? When the IDF withdraws? Does that start immediately when the plan is agreed upon? So, on the one hand, this is a very broad framework for an end to the war and even beyond that moving forward. On the other hand, it also needs to be looked at as something that is a framework, but still needs to be negotiated. That said, where do things stand? What did Israel say? What has Hamas said about this proposal? During the meeting between Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu on September 29th, Trump presented Netanyahu with his plan, and the White House also made it public, and importantly, even before Netanyahu had the chance to publicly respond during a joint press conference with Trump, the White House already published these details. During that joint press conference, Netanyahu stated that Israel fully endorses Trump's plan, adding repeatedly that it adheres to Israel's 5 terms for ending the war. I will say in a moment of analysis, the plan does not quite adhere to Israel's 5 terms for ending the war. It does not explicitly talk about the complete demilitarization of Gaza and how that happens. It says that will happen, but it talks about offensive weapons, not defensive weapons. Israel's 5 terms for ending the war also said that the Palestinian Authority will have no governing power in the Gaza Strip. This plan explicitly says that they will have it in the future. Nonetheless, Netanyahu said that as far as Israel is concerned, they're willing to go along with this plan. Netanyahu, likely for home consumption, more said that this adheres to all the terms that he put forward, but that has been Israel's at least official position. Following this, the plan was given to Hamas through the Qatari and Egyptian negotiators, and the group came under monumental pressure from a series of Arab countries to respond positively to Trump's proposal. There were reports of disagreements within Hamas's leadership, specifically about issues relating to disarming and Israel's military withdrawal. However, on October 3rd, I'll say this happened also several hours after Trump issued an ultimatum to Hamas to respond, the group published its response. In his response, after heaping praises on Arab, Islamic, and international actors for bringing forward a plan to end the war, and also heaping praises on U.S. President Trump himself, the group stated that it is willing to release all hostages in one phase if conditions on the ground permit it, and called for immediate negotiations to work out the details. In other words, the group said they are willing to not go for the phased release, but instead do that one phase release that Trump wants, and called on everyone to enter into negotiations to work this out. The group also stated that it accepts transferring governing powers in Gaza, but it said specifically to a Palestinian technocratic government. It explicitly did not mention the idea of an international board that has any role in this. It said it's willing to transfer power to a Palestinian governing body, and that it's willing to accept that it will not be the governing power in the Gaza Strip. Beyond that, the group said that all other matters in Trump's plan that relate to Gaza's future must be answered within a Palestinian dialogue. In other words, Hamas is saying they can't answer for what will be Gaza's future. That has to be answered for by all Palestinians. This theoretically relates to the issue regarding international forces in Gaza and possibly the future of the Gaza Strip. But I'll also say that Hamas is quote-unquote trying to be sneaky in this, and they're also lumping the issue of disarming, the issue of removing what they call the Palestinian resistance option from the Palestinians. Hamas did not relate at all to its disarming. That also was seemingly lumped within this idea that they can't speak towards the future of certain aspects that has to be discussed later, disarming or demilitarizing the Gaza Strip. So in Hamas's response, they did not relate to that at all. Initially, there was an expectation that Hamas's response will, quote-unquote, enrage U.S. President Trump, and Israel reportedly already was preparing an announcement that Hamas has rejected Trump's deal and that Israel is going to expedite its military campaign and intensify it in Gaza City. Trump, however, gave a very surprising response to what Hamas said with regards to his proposal. First, within several minutes, he retweeted Hamas's statement indicating his approval of it. Then, within an hour, the U.S. president followed this up with a statement seemingly overlooking the fact that Hamas did not acknowledge demilitarizing in the Gaza Strip and other facets. Trump stated that, quote, "Based on the statement that was just issued by Hamas, I believe they are ready for lasting peace." In addition to that, Trump continued, saying, again, quote, "Israel must immediately stop the bombing in Gaza so that we can get the hostages out safely and quickly," end quote. He also added that discussions are already underway on details of implementing the plan. Soon after, Trump also issued another video statement thanking a series of countries, specifically Qatar, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and other countries, but a lot of commentators noted he did not mention Israel, thanking them for their assistance and stating that this is a historic day towards ending wars in the Middle East. Within Israel, Axios reported that Netanyahu was caught completely by surprise by Trump's response. Nonetheless, the country seemed to oblige with the fact that Trump said stop the bombing, and within an hour, the Israeli military issued statements saying that they have been ordered to prepare for the implementation of the first phase of hostage release in the Gaza Strip, and other reports stated that the Israeli military was ordered not to do anything that may endanger the implementation of Trump's plan, and furthermore that the IDF was also ordered to move to defensive operations only in Gaza. So with that, where do things stand right now? On October 4th, it was announced that on the upcoming Monday, a high-level negotiation meeting will take place in Cairo. This will include a Hamas delegation. The reports did not say who is going to participate from Hamas. U.S. representatives that include Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Qatari delegations, as well as an Israeli delegation that is made up of Minister Ron Dermer, who is one of Netanyahu's most trusted confidants, as well as the head of the Israeli Shabak and other Israeli security officials. Even before that negotiation meeting, hours before I recorded this, Trump issued another statement showing a slightly different and more detailed redeployment map in the Gaza Strip, and he stated that Israel has agreed to this first withdrawal line and that the ceasefire can begin once Hamas approves. I'm going to say in a moment of analysis, at this point it is actually unclear if Israel has agreed to that through a process of negotiations or if Trump is simply putting this out there, same as after Hamas issued their statement, Trump said they're ready for peace. Hamas did not say that, but Trump said that they're ready for peace, seemingly trying to lock them into that. Possibly in a similar manner, Trump is saying Israel's already agreed to this. It's unclear. Israel didn't say publicly, at least, that it agrees to this. At this point, it is somewhat unclear. It's also important to note that at this time, despite Trump's call to stop bombings in the Gaza Strip, fighting in Gaza has not come to a halt. Even on October 3rd and October 4th, artillery fire was reported in the areas of Gaza City. Airstrikes were also reported throughout Khan Yunis. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad also reported firing mortars at an IDF outpost in the eastern parts of Gaza City, near Sajaiya. I only mention this because it is important to remember that the war is far from over, even though a lot of people are talking as if it's about to be over. And also because these situations can be extremely volatile. Any spiral in the fighting that would result in a substantial amount of casualties, even accidentally, can very likely lead negotiations to be derailed. This is something that has happened before in this war over the last 2 years. Again, at this point, the biggest news is that Hamas put out that statement. Trump said that as far as he's concerned, they're ready for peace and all the sides are supposed to meet on Monday. But at the same time, fighting is still ongoing in the Gaza Strip. Obviously, we'll see where things develop. Before I conclude, I'm going to mention that this coming Tuesday is going to mark the second anniversary of the October 7th attack and the beginning of the Israel-Hamas War. In light of this, I'm going to be doing another live stream that I'm going to broadcast on my YouTube channel. I'm going to do this at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States, 6 p.m. Pacific Time in the United States. During this time, I'm going to discuss some of the major trends in the war, but mostly I'm looking to try to field any questions that people might have about what has happened in the last 2 years. So please feel free to join and prepare any questions that you have in advance. I will say try to keep the questions as simple as possible because there are hopefully going to be a lot of them. I'll do my best to answer as many questions as possible, but try to keep them as concrete as possible, and feel free to join that live stream. I will put up a link to that shortly after I upload this video. That concludes my latest summary of the Israel-Hamas War, latest report in the Israel-Palestine Report. If you find these informative, please do remember to send them on to anyone who you think might be interested in them. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a professor of political science and an Israel Institute fellow at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.